What's up, YouTube? This is Sam with the Gent Mafia, and guys, I'm starting to lose some sleep, and the reason for that is because Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast, my gameplay is over. We defeated Desan, and I'm just super bummed out that I can't play the game anymore, guys. It's just, oh my gosh, it's tearing me up inside. Not really, man. It was a pretty good game, but I am going to be doing a review of the game, and I want to talk about a couple of some of the more important things. I'm not going to touch the graphics because this is a game that was made 14 years ago, back in 2002. So I'm not going to touch the graphics. The graphics were probably really, really awesome at the time, especially for a 2002 game. But like looking at a game that's made in 2016, it's like night and day. So I am going to do a review of it just off of like the plot, the gameplay, and the sound. I'm going to start off with the sound. I'm just going to say this, guys, you killed it. You were absolutely awesome with the sound. It has everything in terms of sound. It has all of like the lightsaber, the blasters, all of the old music. You've got like the cantina music and everything, man. They hit that on the head. All the sounds are on point. And that was just kind of something to talk about. I just want to get that one out of the way. Sounds, they blew that out of the water. That was probably the best thing that they did. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that this game, like I was saying, is released back in 2002 by a little company called Raven Software. Raven Software was bought up by Activision, and Raven Software, most recently, what they've worked on is Call of Duty, especially like Call of Duty Ghost, which not a lot of people want to talk about just because it's Call of Duty Ghost, man. I mean, let's be honest here. That's probably the weakest of the series. But they didn't make Call of Duty Ghost themselves. They've kind of worked with the DLC and some of the online multiplayer kind of things like that. So that's kind of the thing. Like if you look at Raven Software, that's some of the stuff they've worked on most recently. So I think I'm gonna go ahead, start this off, talk about the plot. The plot wasn't too bad. It's got a really cool premise. So it starts off, you're Kyle Katarn. You're a fallen Jedi turned mercenary. You're flying around with your partner Jan Ors. You guys protect the Valley of the Jedi. That's like you, Jan, and Luke Skywalker, like the three people that know about the Valley of the Jedi. And you're tasked with protecting it from like the Sith, and you're like going through. This is after like Vader has like fallen, like Luke's taken down, like that whole regime. So this is like after that, and you're going around as a mercenary. You're like cleaning things up, doing little missions here and there, and then you run into this dark Jedi, like this Sith master called like Desan. Desan's like a old like Cretaceous period, like Tyrannosaurus Rex. I don't know if that's correct. He might be Jurassic period. I don't know. I haven't looked that up. That's some of the science I don't know off the top of my head. But you're running into Desan, and he takes Jan, and you got to go and you got to like stop him. He's trying to build like an army using like the power from the Valley of the Jedi, which you led him to out of your anger. And it's like a good little battle between like good and evil. And you see like Kyle Katarn like start swaying back to like the light side, and like it's pretty cool. And like you meet some of the old characters. You meet like Lando Calrissian, Luke Skywalker. I'm pretty sure that they're voiced by the guys that played them in the movies. So if that's true, awesome. If not, then like the people that played them, their voices were on point. So tip of my hat to you guys on that. Sound like I'm saying, fantastic. Um, it's got a cool plot, but I felt like a couple of the times in the story when you were going through, they kind of, I didn't think that they did it the best way. They tried like turning the character of Kyle Katarn like into a kind of a wisecracker at sometimes, and like he just I don't know, like some of his stuff, like some of his jokes were just kind of like poorly written, and like they weren't funny. Like even back then, I probably wouldn't have thought they were funny, but like especially now, like they're just not funny. And like a few of his lines, they just felt forced. It seemed like they were about to like release the game. They're like, ah, crap, this guy doesn't talk enough. So let's go ahead and let's like pencil in a couple lines for him to write and real quick record it. Like kind of crap to me. Um, Especially like this back and forth exchange with like a bartender at one point. Worst level in the game. I'm gonna say this right now. Worst level in the game. I hated that level, and that was there was so many reasons for that. But like just some of his lines, they just felt kind of like crap, and some of the plot and storytelling was a little bit bad. But overall, it was a good idea. They just kind of didn't execute things necessarily in the best way, in my opinion. But like, I don't want to give that a pass because like if you look at like I'm gonna tell you guys five of the games that came out back then. And these like this is around 2002, 2001, 2002, and these games have like exceptional storytelling in my opinion. So Elder Scrolls Morrowind, Grand Theft Auto 3, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, Kingdom Hearts, and Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. So like those 5 games, those have pretty phenomenal storytelling. So I don't think storytelling should be like a wave in like this. It's like, oh well, it's an old game. Nuh-uh. Storytelling that doesn't get a pass in my book. Especially when you're looking at those 5 games that like knock storytelling out of the book. This game shouldn't get a pass on that. So it was a good plot. They just kind of handled it poorly. So I'm gonna get kind of the meat and potatoes of the game, and that's the gameplay. So it's an older engine, 2002 engine. So there are some things that's like a little wonky. Some of the controls are a little different. I was playing it on a PC. I wasn't using a controller or anything like that. So I don't know if this is necessarily made for the PC. I think this was like an Xbox game. Like it was made more for the Xbox, but I think it was also a PC game. This was kind of I assume that they had like the Xbox in mind. So the gameplay wasn't too terrible. There were a couple times, when it was a little wonky and a little bit frustrating, especially like some of the platforming. The platforming was a little bit difficult to mess around with just because it was just a little wonky. They tried to do some precision platforming in a game where like precision's not the easiest thing to do. Um, and then there was one part at the end there, like after you beat Gallic Fire, you're floating around in a zero gravity for no goddamn reason. It's just, and like the whole moving around the zero gravity was really wonky, and it was more frustrating than it needed to be. It was just kind of dumb. Uh, so like the gameplay, it's not bad. It's because it's an older game, it does not hold your hand at all. If you're looking at like especially like games nowadays, like they'll give you a waypoint and you're supposed to it's just like go to this waypoint and do whatever you need to do and it's like great, done. This game it's like this is what you need to do, figure it out. And it's like okay, and they just like throw you into the map and they're like you need to go kill this guy or you need to go rescue this guy. Just figure out however you got to do it. And so that's what you would do. Um, Sometimes it's frustrating. I don't know, like I don't really remember that too much back in the day, like being an issue. Uh, but like nowadays, it this was pretty frustrating for me. Um, so like they would give you puzzles and they wouldn't tell you how to figure out these puzzles. Early game, this is really difficult because especially now with how you're thinking, like a lot of gamers with how their minds worked, it just the puzzles they require thinking, which isn't a bad thing. Uh, but when you're like first playing this for like the first half of the game, it's pretty difficult to figure out and it can be frustrating at times. But around like the end of the game, you're starting to think about like, oh, how is this game going to set up this puzzle? And you kind of start figuring it out and it kind of streamlines it a little bit more from there. Like at the end, there's like fire at like the end of this little pathway and I just happened to look up and I saw a pipe. I'm like, oh, obviously that's a water pipe. Break that, put out the fire. So that's like they have really cool ways to solve the puzzles. It's just a little bit frustrating in the beginning, which if you can get past that, awesome, all well and good. The puzzles will make you think, so that's pretty cool. The enemies, so my God, they have a pretty good variety of enemies in here. The one that I would say is the most worthless. There's like this robot. It's like a smaller like walker, and it's just like it does almost no damage, and it takes like way too long to kill, and it's really noisy. It was a bad enemy. It was just kind of stupid. You had stormtroopers running around, which were pretty cool to see. They were like mercenary and bandits. They had like little bowcasters. The snipers, they were pretty cool to see every once in a while. I felt like they spaced them out pretty well. The Dark Jedi's, they were fun to run into. The lightsaber fights, man, those were really cool. Uh, but the enemies I hated the absolute goddamn most were those stupid grenadiers, and you could tell that this company ended up working on Call of Duty because those grenadiers had martyrdom, and it was just so freaking frustrating. Like the grenades were just so bad. It was awful. Um, it just sucked. Uh, so yeah, like the enemies, they were pretty cool. They did a pretty good job with them, with the exception of, like I said, the Grenadiers. If you play this game, that's gonna be like your biggest frustration is the Grenadiers. And I was even playing it on the lowest difficulty, just because like even on the lowest difficulty, just like the level still took like an hour, and like the enemies would still kill you, and like it was always the Grenadiers that killed me. Every single time I would get like blown up by a Grenadier, and it was just like ah. And this game, it was like back in the day they didn't really have checkpoints. I mean, there were some checkpoints. Like this game would like do it like about like 3/4 of the way through the level, it would give you a checkpoint most of the time. But otherwise you'd have to like save and create your own checkpoint. Spoiler alert, I did that. Just because it would get frustrating, and I didn't want to like play this like for like 2 hours for a level, just because you would go like 30 minutes through an hour-long level, and then you would die, and you'd have to start all the way from the beginning because it didn't give you a checkpoint. And you have to play that half an hour over again, only to get blown up by a stupid grenadier that you killed already. So it was kind of frustrating with that with the enemies. The next kind of thing, I have a little bit of beef with this, but I'm gonna pass this off on they were working with what they had, but the level design was a little bit weird. The thing that I had the biggest issue with was the backtracking. You had to do a lot of backtracking in this game, and like they would give you a lot of ways that's like, well, you don't really need to do anything in here, and it would just kind of like waste your time, and you just I don't know. It was I think they did that just to make it so that way it seemed like the world was bigger than it actually was, just because, they're not working with a 50 gigabyte, like, open world, kind of ecosystem. They're dealing with, like, kind of a linear kind of game here. So, I think that's the biggest issue that it was for me, is there was a lot of backtracking, which kind of led it to be a little bit, difficult to play at times, a little bit frustrating because, it was just a waste of time running into some rooms. Or, like, you would go to the other side of the map just to do this thing. So that was a little bit frustrating, but I mean, overall, it wasn't too bad. Uh, yeah, it wasn't too bad, honestly. So the gameplay, it was pretty good. And then, like, to tag onto the gameplay was the combat. We're gonna start it off. I want to talk about, like, at the beginning of the game, you have guns. So because you're like a Jedi, you're like, oh, Kyle Katarn, I don't want to play around with the Force anymore. I don't want to be a Jedi anymore. So I'm just gonna use guns as a mercenary. And that was kind of cool. I mean, they start you off with a really crappy gun. You pick up Stormtrooper gun. And, like, after that's like the first guy that you run into. You kill a Stormtrooper, and like you pick up one of their guns. And let me tell you, if in the movies, like, if this is like an accurate representation of like the guns, how they shoot in this game, if they shoot like that in the movies, 100% understand why they miss in the movies, because these things have no goddamn grouping at all. Like the original like Stormtrooper blaster that you get like at the beginning of the game, terrible grouping. It's a shitty gun. And like any of the guns that might be like usable, like there's a machine gun and a shotgun, you don't get those until like after you get a lightsaber, and you're playing a Star Wars game. So why would you use those over a lightsaber? I mean, I guess if you want to, then by all means go ahead and do it. But I mean, I'm playing as a Jedi, man. I'm using a lightsaber. Like that's just what you do. So like any of the guns that are usable, I mean, I guess a sniper rifle, and they have like a couple levels in there where you want to use your sniper rifle, which is pretty cool. Outside of that, though, like the guns, they suck, and any of the ones that are usable, you don't get them until like the end of the game. So there's kind of like no point to like even play around with the ones that are even kind of good. So the guns, I felt like they could have handled them a little bit better. The ammo too, like little things like that. So yeah, the guns, they're not bad. They're just kind of like a necessary evil. Like they just completely get phased out by the time you get a lightsaber. There's just no point to have them. So might as well just go ahead and jump right into the lightsabers. So the lightsabers are probably the gameplay mechanic that they handled absolutely the best. The lightsabers were fantastic. The lightsaber combat, it was really, really cool. They did everything well in this. So you only get like the standard one-handed lightsaber, the standard blue lightsaber one-handed. But the thing that they did with that is they made it so that way you had three stances. You had like a power stance, a speed stance, and then one that was like in between. It was like kind of powerful and kind of quick. So they had like three different stances. You could do like flips. You could throw your lightsaber. If it got knocked out of your hand, you had to like jump around and like use like a force ability and like pull it in your hand, and like you could do all kinds of really cool stuff with this. There was like clashing and everything. So the lightsaber combat was fantastic. That was probably like I've played a couple Star Wars games in my day, and I think this game might have done lightsaber combat the best. So if you're looking for like a game to play around with like a lightsaber, this might be the game for you, just because of how well that they handled that lightsaber combat. Um, it was honestly it was the best part of the game. So yeah, like to tag off with like the lightsabers, you would also, because you're a Jedi, I mean you have force powers. The force powers, you know, they're they tried, they really did. I think they honestly tried. but there's some balancing issues with these. They gave you all of the force powers. They gave you light force powers, and they gave you dark force powers. So like you could use like lightning, choke, push, heal, Jedi mind trick, which is like kind of token in a couple things. And you could use them for solving puzzles or like combat, but there was like three of them were the ones that I ended up figuring out that speed was absolutely broken in this game, and that's how I ended up like cheesing it at the end because like the game almost forces you into it just because of like some of the stupid things and like how frustrating they'll get at times. It kind of forces you to use like speed as a broken way to kind of like out yourself to like the game because you would pop it and you would just run behind people and you just cut them up and then it was done. You're done with it. You can rinse your hands of it. I'm done with the Sith. Over. Um, so that was kind of broken. It was like just it was stupid. I don't know. I was upset about that. And then heal, that was nice. That was definitely a good thing. Although in the beginning, it's kind of stupid because you have to sit there and Tebow. At the end of the game, though, you could just like pop it and just like keep running. And that was kind of nice. Force jump was pretty cool. I wish that they had that like at full force, like at the beginning of the game, just that way you could like flip around and like do a lot of cool stuff. But I understand why they did it, just that way you'd have to do like a little bit more thinking with your platforming, use elevators and stuff like that. But the dark powers, like the lightning and the choke, like those, they were awful. Like the lightning, it sucks up your entire force bar. It's like a mana bar, but just like for the force, doesn't do a lot of damage. Like sucks up the whole thing immediately, and like doesn't kill like anything. Like, even a stormtrooper doesn't do a lot of them. I guess like from getting like shocked by Vader or something like that. I guess they grew like immune to it or something, but it did nothing. You're never going to use choke because you're almost never one on one with anybody to make it even worth it. If you're going against like a dark Jedi or anything like that, there's a good chance that like they'll block it. Like if even like push or pull, like I used push at the beginning before I figured out about the speed. I've used push. They would just like block it. I don't know how they did it, but they would block it. So I imagine they would do the same thing with the choke. So there was just like no point to use it. Like they didn't even use choke. It was just like there's no point to use it. So yeah, like the Dark Jedi powers, they were just completely underpowered. I know they want you to be like you're a good Jedi, but like just let me play around with these things a little bit. And like even like the good Jedi powers, like the push and the pull, those were only used for like quest. The mind trick, that was only used for like quest. Outside of that, like the speed, man, that was just absolutely broken. It was kind of dumb, but it is what it is. All in all, I would say it is a pretty good game. On a scale of like 1 to 10, I would give the game an 8.5. So it was pretty good. There were definitely some things that they could have done better. It was just some of the gameplay mechanics I wasn't a big fan of, and some of the plot, just how they handled things, I wasn't huge crazy on. But all in all, it was a pretty good game. If you want to play an old Star Wars game, especially with like the lightsaber combat, man, this thing is off the charts. It's like even better than like some of the ones that they have nowadays. Um, yeah, I think this game's like $10 right now on Steam. If you're feeling kind of nostalgic and you want to play something a little bit older and you want to get your Star Wars, fix, this would definitely be a good game. I would definitely recommend picking this up at the lower price point. It was good. I enjoyed myself, even though it was frustrating at times. I definitely recommend it to you. If you want to go ahead and give it a shot, by all means, go ahead. There is multiplayer on this, although I didn't check it out. I'm assuming, there's nobody on the multiplayer, just because, it's a 14-year-old game. So I don't expect to see anybody on there. I don't know if you can, like, kill bots or anything like that. But, it was a good game for what it was. But I would like to thank you guys for checking out this video. Please give it a thumbs up. Helps my channel out tremendously. And I'm gonna be doing, since this is done, I think the next, I'm debating on whether or not I want to do Dark Souls, just because everybody and their mother is playing Dark Souls 3 right now. But I'm kind of playing around with the idea. I'm kicking around. I'm gonna be doing a little bit of Kerbal right now, and I think I might release another video coming out pretty quick here if I do decide to go with like the Kerbal playthrough for a little bit. Um, but yeah, this is Sam with the Gent Mafia. Please give the video a thumbs up. Helps me out tremendously. And if you haven't, please subscribe, join the family, and I will be back with more